We're at Twin Views. Going off to the right view is obviously a mound, now that we're sensitive to mounds. Consider the relative value, and probably price, of cemetery plots relative to whether they sit on a little knoll, whether they have great views, whether their position is unique. I never realized that the Mississippi River had these huge bodies of water adjacent to it, or put another way, that there were islands as big and as long as there appear to be here, if that's the better way to describe this river. A prominent viewpoint for those who prize that sort of thing for a burial site. Here another view farther north. What an adventure to have come up here on a boat. Here the geology, which you can't see very well. The bluff that we're standing on, the ones that we see in the distance, apparently are these sedimentary rocks built up from 450 million years ago, when the area was covered by a sea, the great inland sea, I suspect. Remains of shellfish in this area from Cambrian and Ordovician times became fossils and turned to stone. Now we're going from the intersection with the main route down to Twin Views up to third scenic view and some more mounds. One of my favorite subjects, a butterfly. Known in the forest by the little creatures as woodpecker tree. Here is the beginning of the mounds as the trail approaches the cliff sides. You wonder if the Indians, Native Americans, would have removed the trees here. Certainly from where the mounds were, they would have removed them perhaps, so that there was a clear view of the river. Or was that not an essential part of their thinking? Now this looks like a long section of mound, although it could be interpreted as one here and then another one there, maybe more so. You don't know in 500 or 600 years what's happened to this landscape. As before, if we look, we can see another mound there, and it may be an animal. It looks like it is just from here. We'll look at the map in a moment, but you can see the legs right there, and then mounds further down. So let's take a closer look. We orientate ourselves. We just came by that little elongated mound, and now we're looking at the bear. So the head is uphill and the haunches, notice how the haunches, like a bear, are rather massive looking at the back legs. Presumably here is the head, and we can see the front legs. Now we can't tell too, again, how much the mound has deteriorated and perhaps flowed, if you will, downhill to disrupt its original configuration. Same with this front paws, which look rather wide to us at this point. The lower three mounds, you wonder when these trees first started to grow. For example, that rather larger one there in the middle. Was it exactly at the time, or just shortly after the mounds were built? Or was it a little bit after 1300, or maybe even much, much later? This would have been a pretty one when she was standing. She's still pretty now, but looking back up, I wonder which was considered the more prominent grave site, if in fact these are all grave sites. And what was the significance, if any, of their relationship to each other and to the bear? Was the bear an afterthought? And how do the mounds, the bear and the long mound, relate to each other, both philosophically and iconically, if there's a difference? I also wonder if the American Indians, or the mound builders, if they somehow landscaped this mound area outside of, surrounding the individual mounds, to create a more pleasing context. Signs warn us against the foolhardiness of wandering over to these cliff edges, which may be 50 to several hundred feet in height sometimes. Although I think you'd hit a few trees and other obstacles on the way down. The mound's built back that far. Why wouldn't you want the most prominent mound to be right here on the edge? Did they somehow suspect that the cliff edge could deteriorate and that your eternity might be interrupted by a long, precipitous fall? I wonder if it's fair to say that in their context, their lifestyle as hunter-gatherers, where tremendous energy was expended all year long in just finding food, whether these would be considered as great achievements, great structures and constructs, compared with an European cathedral or an Egyptian pyramid. Not physically the same size, but relative to the time available within a culture, the free time, to have its leaders squander resources and time, a resource, on such manifestations of their importance, justified by religion or not. These pretty and fragile flowers, if they be such. There must be some singular significance to this long, oblong-shaped mound. Is elongated, but not regularly so. In other words, down this end it looks much wider than it does up at that end. Not quite trapezoidal, but moving in that direction. There's supposed to be two, so we'll walk up further. Found the second mound, a fair distance away from the first. Whether the mound people had anticipating putting something in between, I don't know. But this mound seems to be somewhat perched on the side of this slope rather than right on top of the little ridge that it's on. And it does look, I think, a little bit more regular as a rectangle, but can't be sure. Going up the hill to the left there, up to where about that tree is, a little bit before it is the top, and here is this mound, kind of on the side of this hill, or this ridge, but now looking down here we can see that we are on a ridge. I'm about centering it right now, I think, pretty much. Why no mounds down there? Why are the mounds farther back? Was something anticipated here that never came about? And there's the river. And as we look at this first one again, going back towards the trail, you can see that it sits off center from the top of this somewhat gentle ridge, but a ridge nevertheless. Why? People disposed to expend this much energy don't do so lightly. There have to be reasons for the questions I'm asking. To get the plain ones too.